All right, so Estefania is going to show you how to go through Module 1. Now, remember, the majority of this is done while doing the actual hip rotations. So the first part is to rub the, well, actually the first part is just to do the hip rotations itself. So I'm not going to go through that because you'll see what the hip rotations are. So the second point there is to rub either side of the pubic bone. So Stephanie's going to hold either side of the pubic bone, right? And then she's going to show you sitting how the rotation is done. Right, so she does large rotations, right, to get the full extension, the full range of motion of all the muscles, and then getting smaller and smaller until she can find that middle point. Okay. Still rubbing either end of the pubic bone while she does that. Great, good. And standing again. Now the second part of this is to rub L5, either side of L5, which is just above the sacrum. It's the lowest vertebra. So she'll be rubbing this point while she's doing the hip rotations again. Again, full range of motion. Part of this is an exercise in coordination, getting the hands and the hips to work together. And the rotation, of course, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller till you get to that centre point. Good. Okay, and standing again. Now, when you're doing this exercise, you don't have to stand up and sit down. We're just doing this for the sake of illustrating where the points are so you can see them better. So 25 mil out, 25 mil up for the third set of points. Rubbing these points while she's doing the rotation. Rotating those hips, get the full range of motion first, then getting back to the centre point, or what they call 0 point. And smaller and smaller, till the final moves are just very tiny, just millimetres in the distance, just until you find that nice middle point. So she's having trouble finding that middle point. Okay, then the last section, you can stay sitting for this. The last section is to rub bladder 67. Way down there on the feet, right? It's the end of the bladder meridian. It's on the little toe, on the outside of the little toe, level with the base of the nail. You don't have to be you don't have to be rotating your hips when you do this one. It's a bit difficult anyway, but it's not necessary. You don't need to do that. All right, good. Thanks, Estefania. Thank you. Oh, you can take your share and wander home. Excellent, thank you. Okay. Module 2 in this, this workshop is libido after birth. Had lots of requests from women after having given birth to get their libido back. Now, depending on how much testosterone the woman has naturally, she will have more or less libido quicker. She has less testosterone, the libido will be around not as fast. She has more testosterone, the libido will come back faster. This will happen with her generally anyway. Usually the people who have problems with libido are those people who already have low testosterone levels, or they have a lot of stress with their partner. Yes, it's true. It's possible. So usually what has to happen is some sort of relationship change has to take place, because otherwise they don't have that hypothalamus stimulation to relate to their partner, so the libido isn't activated in the first place. In fact, what happens is the more stress they have with their partner, the more they look at their partner, the more stress reactions they have. All right? So it's important to be able to deal with the stress side of it. So if you have a person who, or yourself, if you have problems with libido after having given birth, or even before, even if it's 20 years after having given birth, then you may want to combine this with the workshop positive response, right, to take care of the emotional stress reaction that may still be associated. But from a neurological point of view, this has a lot to do with how the hormones are regulated after birth. I mentioned before that sometimes people say, oh, I've had this problem ever since birth. Not their birth, but giving birth to their children. And it's really because usually the pituitary gland and or the hypothalamus have not reset themselves after giving birth. It's very common. It's really very common. How many people here have had children? Women, I mean. Okay. Just a quick question. Have you noticed changes since giving birth that have only been since birth and have never gone away again? You have? No? Yes? No? No. Actually, that's about the percentage. 25% of women who give birth have ongoing issues from the process of giving birth. So actually, out of the 4 here, the percentage is exactly correct, so well done. Now, obviously, in some circumstances, some societies, that's a higher percentage because their education is less, their health care is less, you know, their health conditions are less. So the percentage in that situation goes up higher. But it's still the same, no matter who you are or where you're from. The pituitary and the hypothalamus have to be reset. They have to be reminded what normal is. Now, because of the sheer amount of hormones circulating through a woman's bloodstream at the time of birth, the pituitary often closes down. It just says, it's too much, I can't handle this, I'm too stressed, I'm just going to ignore everything. So then it only supports basic to life systems. Because if it shut down completely, you'd die. And you don't want to do that. So the second module is actually working on resetting or waking up these higher glandular levels. Now you could use this in combination with balancing your hormones as well to amplify the effect. You know, so if you've done the workshop called Balancing Your Hormones, then you could do that in conjunction with this module and both would amplify each other. So one, you rub the points between the eyebrows on the forehead, the glabella, for 30 seconds. This is a reflex for the pituitary gland and the pineal glands. But in this case, it's more likely to be the pituitary. But some people who have period problems after birth, that means the period doesn't become regular naturally, this will also help with the pineal gland to reset those, what they call circadian rhythms. Second one is you rub the glabella and under the right breast. Right, so you're rubbing the glabella and under the right breast at the same time. This is obviously helping the pituitary and the liver to work together again. So if there are hormonal problems with the liver, the pituitary can recognize that and adjust the output of hormones accordingly. But also the pituitary has certain functions that help the liver to work better. So the pituitary can produce chemicals that stimulate the liver to work better. Now, people who smoke have a problem with this relationship because the smoking produces, or in the cigarettes or what they're smoking, has a lot of nicotine in it. And nicotine is an artificial liver stimulant. Did I say something wrong? So nicotine is an artificial liver stimulant. That means people who smoke actually are stimulating their liver to work harder than it should. Now in that case, what's happening is the liver is breaking down hormones faster than it should be. So it's taking hormones out of the bloodstream that should still be in the bloodstream for a lot longer. So there are lots of complications with smoking because of the sheer number of different chemicals in the cigarettes. The nicotine itself is also an addictive substance, as well as other of the chemicals. Plus, people use the smoking as an emotional suppressor, right? Literally pushing it into their lungs so that the emotions that are caught in their lungs are not going to come to the surface, so they don't have to feel stuff that they don't want to feel. So there's lots of things involved with smoking, but with this axis, the pituitary liver axis, smoking is one of the things that will interrupt this very, very quickly. And I found a number of people, women especially, who gave up smoking before pregnancy, but then as soon as the baby was born, boom, they're straight back into the smoking. That is going to slow down their recuperation enormously. And if they're breastfeeding, it's going to create complications for the baby. You know, like they have the mentality to stop smoking during pregnancy, and then they think after the baby is born, that's the end of it. It's not. If they're breastfeeding, they're still putting part of their chemistry into the baby. And nicotine is one of them, and that will affect the liver function of the baby. Absolutely. It gives them digestive problems and colic and all sorts of, nasty things. So what tends to happen in that case, which is not just related to smoking, but anything that is toxic in the woman will tend to be put into one breast and not the other. So when they're breastfeeding, they'll find that when the child feeds off one breast, it's okay, but if it feeds off the other one, it has problems. That's usually an indication that the woman has some sort of toxicity in the system that needs to be removed. Either she's smoking, she's drinking, she's taking drugs, she's allergic to stuff, right? She's taking in the chemicals that are added to foods and she's trying to separate them out, but they'll still go into the breast milk. They get there via the lymphatic system, which is, basically the breast is a lymphatic tissue, and the little glands and stuff that produce the milk get their nutrition from the lymphatic system. That's why the breasts are mainly lymphatics. Well, the lymphatic system is where they're putting all the toxins. It's really quite amazing that the subconscious will actually put the toxins that are bad for the baby in one breast and try and keep one breast clean. And, you can oftentimes, check if you know how to do muscle monitoring, you can check one breast, it's okay, and check the other, and it changes. That means that the mother is actually separating out the toxins to put them into one breast, and you actually need to get the woman to excrete the milk from that breast because that's how she's getting rid of the toxins, but not feed the baby with that breast until the toxins are cleared out. Now, obviously, if you know how to do it, you can use various balancing techniques to help, the woman to get rid of that. In the next workshop called Clean Body, right, there are some techniques in there that will assist that process of detoxifying very, very well. So, in fact, that's one of the reasons why we've included Clean Body into this group of workshops. If the person is smoking or even has been a smoker, right, this pituitary and liver connection is going to be out of balance and it needs to be reset. Even if they don't start smoking again, from smoking before, the glabella and the liver may be disconnected, and the pituitary and the liver may be disconnected and not functioning properly. So you need to rub the glabella and the liver at the same time. 2.3, you rub the glabella and 25 mil out and 25 mil up from the umbilicus on both sides. Now, if you haven't worked it out already, this is kidney. This is a kidney reflex. So you're rubbing the glabella and the kidney points, right, to make sure that the pituitary and the kidneys are working together. This is helping fluid balance. And the hormones, like the antidiuretic hormone and so on, to balance out again to make sure the fluids are regulated properly. 2.4, you rub the glabella and between ribs 3 and 4 on both sides, this is the pituitary and thyroid connection. Very important, particularly if the woman is having postnatal or prenatal depression. You can use these points, glabella and 3 and 4, to help regulate their thyroid activity. And the last one, the glabella and both sides of the pubic bone, to connect the pituitary function again with the reproductive organs and the glands that regulate the reproductive organs. All in that order. Obviously, in some people where there's a particular weakness, maybe, for example, the woman has a genetic weakness in one ovary, for example, then rubbing the glabella and either side of the pubic bone is going to make her recuperate a lot faster. Because the genetic weaknesses are going to be the last things that the woman recuperates from. But they're the things that they actually feel the best from when they are rebalanced. So this is a really good set of actions to not only increase libido, but it will increase the hormone circulation, the nutrition, the water levels to all of the reproductive organs, the liver, the kidneys, and so these are all the things that are necessary for a healthy libido. So when that's done, then probably they'll come back to you with some interesting stories of how well it worked, because they're very interesting. And they're quite happy to tell you about it, which is even more interesting. So let's have a look at where these things are on the chart. 2.1, here is the point for pituitary and pineal. Right? Now you can rub this point all by itself to start with, just to wake it up for 30 seconds, because sometimes that by itself is enough to start the change of how they feel sexually and towards their partners, but also towards their baby. Right? If a mother has a low libido, it means that her glandular system is out of balance somewhere. It also means that she may not have an appropriate response to her baby's demands. Because if she's not in control of these hormonal connections and these organ connections, then she may not be in control of a lot of emotional responses as well. And particularly when you're rubbing the pituitary and the thyroid points, that can really make a big difference to how she feels, not only about her partner, but about her child too. So we start by rubbing the point itself. 2.2, you rub the point here and the liver reflex on the right side. 2.3 is down here. You're rubbing the pituitary reflex and the kidney points, 25 mil out and 25 mil up from the belly button. Rubbing these to wake up the relationship between the pituitary and the kidneys. 2.4, go from the pituitary to between ribs 3 and 4 on both sides for the thyroid function. That also includes parathyroid function as well. So sometimes after birth, women have an osteoporosis type reaction, usually because they haven't had the right form of calcium in the first place. They've had dairy products and other sorts of things that were not appropriate for them, or they just didn't eat any calcium anyway. And so they start to lose mineral density because the baby takes all the minerals from the mother. And osteoporosis is not a lack of calcium, it's a lack of mineral density in the bones. Calcium is one of those minerals. Quite often reorganizing or rubbing the pituitary points with these thyroid points will reorganize the levels of calcium in the bloodstream by resetting the parathyroid glands. So that's an important part of supporting those women who come up with osteoporosis afterwards. You'd also want to do that on the children, on the baby, because that will probably also have the tendency to become osteoporotic. We're up to 2.4, 2.5. So now we rub the pituitary reflex and either side of the pubic bone to connect the pituitary functions with the reproductive organs. So let's have our volunteer for science. Come on, Estefania, don't be shy. That's a girl. Thank you. Good. So the reflex for the pituitary gland is here. So what she has to do is rub it, as it says in the book, for 30 seconds. After birth, the woman will actually feel the timing for rubbing this point. So sometimes it's only 10 seconds, sometimes it's 60 seconds, depending on how she is at the time. Now, women are very, very sensitive after birth, as they are during birth, and that sensitivity, they can use to monitor themselves and their own responses. So at least 30 seconds, more if she feels like she needs it. Right? The second is rubbing the glabella and under the right breast. So we've got the glabella point and the liver reflex. Remember, the liver reflex is between ribs 5 and 6, right? So it's where the breast actually attaches to the chest, not where it hangs down to. So quite often it's up under the support area of the bra. Third one is the glabella and the kidney points, 25 mil out, 25 mil up. All right, so as you can see, you can use one hand to rub the kidney points and the pituitary at the same time. 2.4 is you rub the glabella and ribs 3 and 4 on both sides. So you can count down. Right, 1, 2, 3. So between 3 and 4. Right, and the pituitary. This is a really good one for your depressive mums. Right, thyroid, parathyroid, and the pituitary. Gets those thyroid hormones working better. Then the last one is the pituitary and either side of the pubic bone. Good. Rubbing, rubbing. And that reconnects the pituitary's control over the reproductive organs and, of course, the hormones that are associated with that. Okay, great. Thanks, Dylan. Good. The effect of this is to increase libido, but it increases also detoxification, water distribution. It increases kidney function, so that, if the mother after the birth has back pains, it usually relates to kidney weakness. So this is a really good module, not just for libido. You can use the libido as a measure of how well the person is recuperating, because a woman will put a lot of energy into other things first, straight after birth, than into libido. Probably in her subconscious, the last thing she wants to do is get pregnant again. All right? So if her libido increases, it's usually the last thing to increase. All the other things have become better in the process. Now she's got enough energy to put into enjoying, relating to a partner again, and so the libido comes up. All right? If she doesn't have any problems with libido, it just means she has more testosterone than most women, but she will still get the benefit of resetting the relationship between the pituitary gland and these other organs anyway. It's not going to make her have more libido if she's already got it, but it will make her function better anyway. All right? So it's still a very good regulating module after birth. Okay? Good. Now, here we have the module 3 for the postpartum depression. Basically, what we're doing with the module 2 is we're setting up the relationships of the hormones between the pituitary and the related organs that have been stressed through the process. In Module 3, you're actually repeating Module 2, but you replace the glabella with rubbing the centre of the base of the clavicle for 30 seconds. Now, basically that means you're replacing the pituitary with the reflex for the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, remember, is the highest gland in the nervous system. It's part of the brain, it's part of the glandular system, and as such, it has connections to both. Well, in most women who have postpartum depression, the thyroid has been low and basically hasn't been able to be a part of the system. So rubbing the pituitary and 3 and 4 ribs, between 3 and 4 ribs, will help the organ to wake up. But if the hypothalamus doesn't share the same opinion, it's still not going to work. They'll feel better shortly after rubbing the points, but at the same time tomorrow they're depressed again. So basically you just go through the same set of points as in Module 2, same relationship, same organ points, but instead of rubbing the glabella, as it says in all these points, you rub the reflexes under the clavicle bone. Because that means you're just replacing now the reflex for the hypothalamus with the reflex for the pituitary, and you're doing the same run-through, the same setup. All right. Then 3.2, it says repeat the same thing, but with the depression in optics if you have it available. Now, we have some available for you to have a play with if you are depressive. If you're not feeling depressive, then I wouldn't suggest that you use those in optics, because they're better used for when you have, depression. Now, if you're trying to get pregnant and it's not working, then using the depression cards can be actually quite a good thing, because people get depressed about not getting pregnant when they want to get pregnant. There could be other things that they have to sort out beforehand, but if they're not getting pregnant and they want to, then there's they just think it's a question mark. They're not sure, they don't understand. But in terms of the chemistry of your body, that's a mild depression. So doing this with the depression cards on your body at the same time can actually take away that uncertainty, right? And it allows the chemistry to reset itself to a better state where you can get pregnant. So, of course, you can also use the antidepressant cards along with all the fertility techniques in the Prepare Your Fertility workshop. So there's lots of mixing and matching that you can do to find what works for you. And everybody's different, and some combinations work for some people and other combinations wouldn't work for those same people. So it's part of the fun is the finding out, because you can only get better in the process. So let's have Stephania out again, and we'll run through. We've already been through the position of the points. The only difference now is instead of rubbing the pituitary gland reflex, we're rubbing halfway along the clavicle underneath. It's about a little bit more than 25mm section, right? So you want to be rubbing along that section, along the base of the clavicle. Now, the trouble with this is that you have a reflex on both sides, because the hypothalamus is actually in 2 halves. In fact, it's actually in lots of different pieces. I think there's about 14 different sections of the hypothalamus. So what you need to do is to rub the hypothalamus points and then combine them with the others, and then do the other side as well. So if you're rubbing, one side, and in this case, because the Module 2 includes rubbing the glabella in the first place, we're going to include that. So then she starts off by rubbing the glabella and the hypothalamus points, because the hypothalamus and the pituitary need to work together as well. Then she can go across to the other side and rub the glabella. So you've got the 2 halves of the hypothalamus getting tied into the pituitary. All right. That by itself can fix a lot of imbalances. I mean, you're talking about the highest level of the endocrine system here and how that relates to its general. So it's a very, very powerful combination. So then she'll rub the hypothalamus and under the right breast. Around about 30 seconds is usually enough. If you do this regularly, and after birth, the woman should do these modules every day for at least a week. Probably the 2 weeks if she wants to, but at least a week. Now rub this side and the liver. So you want to tie all of these organ reflexes into the hypothalamic reflex, because now you're waking up the hypothalamus's attention to these organs. One of the jobs that the hypothalamus has is to decide how much energy goes to certain functions. So if you're stimulating the hypothalamus reflex to the liver, the hypothalamus will now know better how much energy to give to the liver. But if that connection is not there, the energy to the liver may be not enough for what it needs to do at the time. So it's a very important module to do on a daily basis, because things change, and they change very fast with women after giving birth, because the change of hormones has to be dealt with efficiently, and this is how you do it. So now she can do the kidney points while rubbing the hypothalamus. Rubbing. Of course, this is balancing, all sorts of energy problems that may exist with the kidneys. Goes across to the other side. Rubbing. Now, sometimes if you're doing this with somebody else, particularly women after birth, they're very sensitive, and rubbing their points, that can be very ticklish or even tender. So just get them to do it themselves. They never hurt themselves, and it does the job just as well. Now we bring in the hypothalamus and the thyroid position. Between the ribs 3 and 4. Rubbing. Under the collarbone. Yeah, it's a shot. Good. It's really good if you're doing this yourself to do it in front of the mirror so you can check your positions. Because, when these things are disconnected, your brain isn't paying attention to the position of the point. So you need to focus on, am I really in the right position? Because I've had people come back and say, oh, it didn't work. And I said, show me how you do it. And they're rubbing totally the wrong position. It's like, well, yeah, if you move it up 3 ribs, then it's going to work. All right. Did we do the other side? This hypothalamus, this thyroid. Okay. Let's go back to thyroid. There's a little bit of a disconnect here, isn't there? Okay. Hypothalamus under the clavicle. Good. Ribs 3 and 4. There you go. Yeah. It's good to get them connected. But that's actually a really good example of what happens when there are those disconnections. Rub your kidney points. Oh, okay. Where's your pituitary? Oh, it's down here. Go back to the book, have a look at the pictures, stand in front of the mirror and make sure you get on the right points. Once you've done it 2 or 3 times, the disconnect disappears and you'll know it instinctively. Then the last one is the hypothalamus and the pubic bone, the pituitary. No, it's a joke. Reproductive organs. Rubbing. And then just move this across to the other side. Great. Now, the last part says repeat this with the depression enoptics if available. So then, you'd get the enoptic cards, put it in your tummy, preferably, in front of your belly button if you can, and then run through the points again. Now, if you're not depressed, you don't have any, emotional, things going on, then you won't need to worry about it. But Really, for women, especially after pregnancy, using those depression cards, even if they think they're not depressed, then the cards can act as a prophylactic for depressive responses later on. Because there's going to be lots of challenges for the woman later on. She has to do her own recuperation, she has to take care of her baby, she has to take care of her husband, she has to take care of the rest of the family if there's a rest of the family, and if she's been working, she's also thinking about preparing herself to go back to work. Then she has to think about what meals to make for dinner. It's like, there's a lot of stuff going on. So even though she may think that, she's not really depressed, it's a good idea for at least in that first week after the delivery to use the depression cards. And there's a set of them. Normally they're used one day at a time. One card one day, second card the next day, and so on. But for the process of post-pregnancy depression, you can use all 5 cards at the same time. But just for that week, usually. All right? Great. Thanks, Alan. Good. All right, we're doing really well. Yes, very good. Module 4 is the pelvic girdle opening. This, as some of you may recognise, this is the same module as you have in care during pregnancy, because that same module during pregnancy is preparing the person for the birthing process, but it's also helping them to support the pregnancy through the process. They're supporting the baby during the pregnancy. So it's important during, and that's why it's in that workshop. It's in this workshop because now, people need to know what to do. We've already set up the muscle relationships in the pelvis in the first place to allow the actual structure to change. Now we have a module that helps with the ability of it to open effectively. Now, this is actually working more on the lower back than it is on the hips. Now, the first one we did is working specifically on the hips and the muscles related to controlling the hip position. This is actually working more on how the hips relate to the spine. While the woman has been carrying the baby, that spinal column has been pulled forward, the lumbar sections have been pulled forward with the weight of the baby, right? And it makes anatomical changes to how the spine sits. This module, while pregnant, helps to take the stress off the spine. After pregnancy, it helps to bring the spine back to its normal position very, very quickly. So if the woman was to do Module 1 and Module 4 together, she would find that the whole of the structure of the hips and the lower back would fall back into place very, very quickly. So if you have yourself experienced any weakness of the back since giving birth, it's probable that your spinal position has never been reset after birth. That affects bladder, it affects reproductive organs, it affects digestion, obviously it affects some sport or positions, and usually the woman's ability to stand for long periods is gone. She can't stand for a long period of time. In fact, they usually stand for 5 minutes and start complaining about having back pain or stiffness in the back of the legs. Because the compensation is to tense the hamstring muscles to try and pull the hips back to keep the lower back stable. So the module here, number 4, is basically you can do this lying or standing, but in most cases this is best done lying first after the pregnancy. The reason for that is usually the woman has given birth in the lying position. Now, if she's given birth in the squatting position, you can do this standing first. But, just ask the woman, what position were you in when you gave birth? Were you lying or were you sitting? She probably won't remember because she wasn't paying attention to those sorts of details. So ask her partner. because usually they know more about those sorts of irrelevant details than the woman does. So we'll run through this as it is. The woman lies on her back with her leg against the wall or some immovable object. She pushes her leg sideways against the wall for 20 seconds, then do the same thing on the other side. All right? One woman lived in a very old house that had very narrow doorways, so she'd stand in a doorway and she'd push her legs against both at the same time. Well, that works. Or you can just move to one side of the door frame, push, move to the other side of the door frame, push, and you're activating the muscles related to stabilising the hips, the gluteal muscles, and that's what we need. Then you rub the pubic bone for 30 seconds. That's either side of the pubic bone for 30 seconds. 4.3, with your toes up or straight forward, all right? So in line with where you're facing. People are having problems with the definition of up and sideways and back and down. It's like, it's all relative. So if your toes are pointing in the same direction as your nose, that's good. As long as your head is straight forward. If your head's this way and your toes are like that, no, that's not right. Okay? So straight forward, feet straight forward. You put tension on the legs as if to pull them apart. All right? They're together, but you're putting tension through the hip area to push the legs apart. Then 2, with the toes pointing out, again with the legs together, but the toes are pointing out. All right, again, try to push the legs out. It's just a matter of putting tension into the muscles of the pelvic area to try and push the legs sideways. Then with the toes pointing in towards the midline of your body, legs together as close as your toes will allow, and then pushing out. Right, now, she should be feeling this pressure in the lower back. Right? Obviously, the tension is in the muscles in the hips, but she will be feeling the tension in the lower back area. Now she does those first 3 exercises again while she holds the little finger and the thumb together. This now includes a lot of the electrical circuits that are related to these particular exercises. If you know anything about the muscles involved, you're doing gluteus medius, gluteus minimus, and what's the other gluteus? Maximus. Maximus, medius, and minimus. Those 3 gluteal muscles are the things that, or the muscles that relate to controlling the pelvic stability and therefore how the spine sits on the pelvis. In going through those 3 positions while holding the little finger and thumb together, you're including the neurology of the muscles with any other neurology that may be connected to the stability or compensation for the lower back. So it helps to wake up the brain to pay more attention to what it's doing with the lower back, because it needs to do that. And during the birthing process, a lot of things get disconnected. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident, but those disconnections need to be reconnected. And that's what's happening in this case. Then 4.4, with the knees bent and spread, with the feet flat on the floor and with the toes in each position of straight, forward, out and in, you have the knees out and push them in. So you're pushing the knees out and you're pushing them in with your hands. So you're creating a different set of tensions than you did with the legs straight. Right? You're actually bringing in the adductor muscles and the gracilis muscles and some other interesting things that are related to stabilising the hips in other ways. So you go through that same process with the feet forward, the feet out, the feet in, right? And that you then repeat again while holding the little finger and the thumb. So this is quite a little bit of an exercise program, but it's specific for resetting the pelvis and the lower back after birth. There isn't a better thing that a woman can do, except maybe Pilates. Mild Pilates exercises after birth is really good for resetting the abdominal muscles. Right? Now, there's There's a little trick that is not written in your book, but I'll tell you anyway because I'm feeling generous. After having given birth, well, during the birthing process, there's a muscle at the base of the abdomen called the pyramidalis muscle. It's a pyramid shape. It's like two little triangles that run off the top of the pubic bone and come up about 4 to 5 inches and run back down to the other side of the pubic bone. So they're like two triangles sitting next to each other above the pubic bone. During pregnancy, with the stretching of the stomach, these pyramidalis muscles turn off. There's no reason for them to be there. Their function is negated by the stretching of the stomach. So after birth, they need to be turned back on again. Otherwise, the pyramidalis muscles being turned off will turn off the rest of the abdominal rectus muscles, which means the woman stays this shape longer. And so a lot of women will actually complain about, the post-pregnancy tummy, right? It just sort of hangs out there, and they do lots of work to try and strengthen it, but they can't from a muscle point of view because the pyramidalis is still off. So how they can fix that is push from the pubic attachment towards the midline, and about 4 or 5 inches up from the pubic bone, they push towards the pubic bone. So they're like pinching the pubic bone area and the centre line 4 or 5 inches up together, and then they do the other side. Right, they can do it with 2 hands. Okay, top of the pubic bone, 4 or 5 inches up, and they push together. And they can hold that there, or they can give it a bit of a wiggle. And what that does is it helps to reset and turn on the pyramidalis muscle. Then they can do their exercises with their abdominal muscles, and they get the benefit. For those guys who have the beer gut or the pizza gut or any sort of gut, the same thing applies. Turn on the pyramidalis muscles before they do any exercises with the rectus abdominis, and they're going to get the benefit. While the pyramidalis is off, the rest of the muscles cannot work efficiently. Right? So they end up with, the beer gut that hangs out here, and it's almost impossible for them to get rid of that because the pyramidalis is an activator for the maintaining of the position of the rectus abdominis. All right? So there's a little extra add-on just for having this DVD, or for being in the workshop, or just for being nice people, I don't know. Okay, now there's a little addition to this that you will probably not have seen in the other workshop, because this is an addition that helps women to have a painless delivery. Yay! Now, that doesn't mean it's going to take away all the pain, but it will reduce the pain to the point where they can go through it very easily and not complain about it afterwards. So 4.5, for a painless delivery, you rub these points in this order. You rub spleen 6. Now, obviously, you want to be doing this when they're going into labour. You don't do this before labour because it might induce an early labour anyway, and that might not be the best timing. When the person starts going into labour, you rub spleen 6. Now, in rubbing these points, you want to put a bit of pressure on them. You want to leave an impression so that when you stop rubbing, the woman feels like you're still rubbing the point. Or if you're rubbing your own point, rub it so that it's really sore, so that when you stop rubbing, you can still feel the point. So spleen 6, large intestine 4, large intestine 11, and bladder 67. All right? We're on page 11. We're in module 4, number 4.5. So you can see that there's a couple of forbidden points there during pregnancy. Why? Because it'll make the contractions start up and be more efficient. That's why you do it during labour. Not only does it make the contractions more efficient, but it takes away any of the pain well, most of the pain of the process. Then the only pain involved is the feeling the woman has of the ligaments extending to open up the pelvic canal to allow the baby to come through. There's always that pressure feeling. That has to be there. That has to be there because that's how the woman's subconscious regulates the pressure on the baby as it's going through the canal and turns on those skin reflexes. One of the questions that somebody asked was, what's the effect of the epidural injections? That is, the anesthesia that they inject into the lower spine so the woman feels nothing. Well, from the point of view of the woman, that's not necessarily a nice thing to do because you're going through some very specific types of coverings of the spinal cord there that develop scar tissue after the needle has been extracted. That scar tissue later on can create neurological signals in the spinal cord that are irrelevant and distracting and unnecessary. They can cause other problems elsewhere. Sometimes people get infections from epidurals. These days it's practically unheard of, but it's still a possibility because some people still have that. And also because of the materials that the needle goes through, sometimes the anesthesia is caught between different layers of the dura mater, which causes other neurological effects later on because it's got no way of getting out of the system. So it stays in the area for a long time. And that changes the chemical nature of the dura mater, which is a neurological component in how we regulate our spinal activity. So from the baby and from the mother's point of view also, she then doesn't have the feedback of how tight the opening is, and so she can't regulate the right pressure to switch on those reflexes in the skin of the baby. Now remember, this baby is covered in this greasy, creamy stuff. It's very slippery, right? And if you've ever had to catch one, you know, they're pretty slippery. You know, you have to pay attention. So there has to be quite a bit of pressure, you know, in the opening to be able to overcome that lubrication effect from the cream to switch on those skin reflexes. That pressure should be there and it should be experienced by the mother. She doesn't have to consciously change anything, but that neurological input is processed by the subconscious and it's regulated. Your subconscious can make it more or less. That's its job. But when the woman has an epidural, she has no control over that anymore because the signals are not getting up to the subconscious. In that situation, it may be necessary at a later time to reset those skin reflexes on the baby. So they're the main things with the epidural. But 4.5 here, using spleen 6, large intestine 4, large intestine 11 and bladder 67, just makes the whole process easy. All the energy that's necessary to go into the birthing process is all there in those points. Now, if that and the first module don't create an easy process in the birth, then you'd use the homeopathic preparation called Caulophylum, Caulophylum, Caulophylum 30, probably CH in this country. Just give one dose and see what happens. If in an hour's time the baby still hasn't come, give another dose. And you can give up to 4 doses of Caulophylum 30. I mentioned this the other day in a list of homeopathic preparations for pregnancy. It's really good for where the labour has continued, and doesn't seem to want to complete. The Caulophylum will complete the process. Some women, and I don't recommend this, but some women actually take it, you know, when they want to have the baby, when they want the contractions to start, and it can start the birthing process. But usually it's not going to do that unless the person's actually ready for it. So if for some reason it's delayed, you know, the psyche of the female can delay the delivery to a certain point. And one of the clients that I had was actually going to the hospital in a taxi, and she was just telling herself, no, I'm not going to have a baby yet. I'm just going to have the baby when I get to the hospital. But the trouble was, when I get to the hospital wasn't defined, so as soon as she got to the hospital, it started. But if women are holding it back and they've used their own hypnotic abilities to do that, the colophilum will override that and start the birthing process. It's a very, very strong reaction to the homeopathic preparation, that the reaction is to, start the contraction process. So it's a very, very good final backup, but I wouldn't use it as a primary mechanism, although homeopaths do use it as a primary mechanism for helping with the birth, because that's all they have. They only have the homeopathics. Right, we're on. So Estefania is going to help us to go through this module 4. It says, lying on your back, but we're going to do it standing just for the sake of illustrating it for you. But you can do this lying and standing. As I said before, if the woman has given birth lying, then she needs to do it lying down. If she gave birth in a squat position or in a vertical position, then she can actually do it standing and get the same effect. So the first thing to do is to stimulate the gluteal muscles by standing against a wall. I'm pretending to be the wall. I'm the wall. I'm made of brick today. And so she's going to tense these muscles but push her leg against me to activate the muscles here. So push, pushing, pushing, pushing. Good. And then just come around the other side. I'm on the other side of the wall now, right? And she's pushing the leg towards me, again tensing the gluteus muscles. Good. And then she rubs the pubic bone, either side of the pubic bone, for, about 30 seconds or so. Yep. Rubbing, rubbing, rubbing. So that activates the major muscles on the side, gluteus medius in particular, and then the stimulation of the lymph drainage to those muscles helps those muscles to reset their integrity. Now with the toes, if you're lying on a bench, your toes would be pointing to the roof. If you're standing, in this case, they're straight forward, where your nose is pointing, right? And so you tense the muscles again, but as if to pull them apart. Right? So both legs are trying to pull apart this way, but you're using your hip muscles to do it. Right? Then you do the same thing with the toes pointing out, pushing the legs out. Bring your heels together. Good. And now push it out. Different set of muscles now. And then the toes together, with the toes together, push your legs out sideways. Good. Now she'll do the same thing, but holding the little finger and thumbs together. Now you can do one or both. You have to do at least one. Right? So with the legs facing forward or up to the roof if you're lying, holding the little finger and thumbs, pushing the legs out. Now this is associating the same muscles as before, but with any electrical systems or circuits that may be attached to those muscles. And all this is doing is waking up the brain's attention to what needs to be reset. Remember, a lot of these muscles are out of balance from the birthing process. And how it does that is it pays attention to how it gets the signal to the muscles via the spinal cord. And so all of the things that are going on in the back are paid attention to. So now with the toes out, holding the little finger and thumb, pushing as if to spread the legs. Good. Toes in, same thing. Great. Now, with the, we're up to now 4.4 in your procedures. With the knees bent and spread apart, now obviously you can do this lying or standing, and then push the knees in while trying to push them out with your legs. So your legs are doing this when your hands are doing that. So you're pushing them together. This brings in different sets of muscles, and it also changes the relative tension in the lower back. Toes out, knees bent and out, pushing them in. Good. Toes in. This is the tricky one. Knees out and bent and pushing them in. Oh, very good. Now she does the same thing again, holding little finger and thumb. So feet facing forward, holding the little thumb and little finger, knees bent, pushing them in. Good. Toes out, bent, pushing in, toes out.
Sorry.
Yeah, and pushing in. Good, and the toes in, knees bent and out, pushing them in. Yay, very good. Okay, so that takes a lot of tension off the discs in the lower back and helps to reset the position of the lower back where it's been pulled out of position from the pregnancy. Now 4.5, if this is being done to assist the birth itself, you'd add 4.5 to this, which is rubbing spleen 6. So we go down here to spleen 6. Let's turn your foot out this way. Good. 4 fingers around this area. Give it a good rub. Now you'd be doing this on both sides. All right, this leg and this leg. On the inside there. Now if they're sore, which after birth they probably will be, you want to just keep going until there's a change of the pain. As soon as it starts to reduce, you can stop and come back to it in an hour's time and do it again. Right? Immediately after birth, you need to do this, a few times fairly soon after to reset all the structure. The next point is large intestine 4, which is, you can see the web, the tendon here for the thumb. Well, there's another one, right, that comes up in, the bone for that leads into the index finger is here. So if you gum up the bone to meet the bone of the thumb, there's an impression in there, it's a little dent. That's large intestine 4. You want to rub that point, and also on the other side. Good. Then we have large intestine 11, so with the hand sort of held sideways. The crease of the arm is here. Just as the muscle comes up to its highest point, just below the crease, you'd rub in this point here. Rub in there. That's large intestine 11. And the other side. And if they're not sure, they can just feel around there for the most tender point. Oh, there it is. Oh, give it a good rub. Right, now, immediately after pregnancy, most of these points will be sore, and you'll be able to find them pretty easily. And if you've got a really bad memory, you just put a little texter mark where you need to rub with the number of the point on it. But we've had women do that, actually, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, written on their body. Very cute. The last one is bladder 67. Now, we saw that before. Bladder 67 is the end of the bladder meridian, which is level with the base of the little toenail. Right? So we rub this one. And the other side. The meridian comes along here, level with the base of the little toenail on the side, and rub that one. Okay. Now, they're the points that you would rub usually after the woman has started labour, right? Or at some point after the waters have broken. Right? If you want to make sure that the contractions are going to start at the right time, you can do this whole process, or even just the points after the waters have broken. Then at the point where the contractions start, you do the points again, just the meridian points. All right? Now, if after that it seems like it's dragging on for too long, do it again. And you can do it, like every 15 minutes if you need to. But what happens is, if the woman has lots of energy, and if she's been doing all the other modules she will have, then rubbing these points will make an obvious change to the quality of the contractions, and you won't need to do it again until that quality drops. If the quality of the contractions drops, then you want to do it again. So you need to follow the woman's actual activity to know when to do the points again. But generally speaking, you could do these every even 15 minutes if you had to. Right? If there's not much response on the first time, I'd wait about 15 minutes and then I'd do it again. Right? But just going over them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, is not going to do it. Right? You need the system to catch up with the effect of rubbing the points, and that's when she'll have the contractions. All right? Great. Thanks, Dylan. Good on you.